Finance Minister Chris Sinckler says the Barbados economy will continue to grow despite the most recent downgrade by Standard & Poor's. Last week, the rating agency lowered the island's long-term local currency sovereign credit rating from CCC Plus to CCC while maintaining other ratings. Mr. Sinckler was speaking to the media on Monday on the sidelines of the St. Michael Battle of the West primary school quiz competition at the St. Leonard's Boys' School. He explained that the downgrade was based on three key things: the rollover risk associated with domestic debt, the upcoming election and whether the planned fiscal program will be implemented, and the potential for a debt restructuring exercise. He addressed each of the concerns.
The issue is really not the downgrade, because the downgrades, the ratings agency will issue their opinion. The question is, are the things that they have identified as concerns to them, are they legitimate and true and insurmountable, or are they surmountable concerns? So let's take them one by one. The issue of the debt rollover. As I said, 50%, just under 50% of the debt domestically of the government of Barbados is held by the NIS and by the Central Bank of Barbados. The rest is held by other commercial institutions. So the question is, since we know the NIS and the Central Bank will roll over their debt because they are government institutions, so it's government lending to itself, the question is, are the other financial institutions prepared to roll over the debt? Now, you would have to ask the banks that, if they're going to roll over the debt. Barbados meets all of its debt commitments on time and in full. Our mantra, something that I came up from the Ministry of Finance, is debt first and salaries, critical programs, national security, health, education, and so forth, and then any number can play. So we do all of those things, and we meet our commitments. Now, whether or not the banks, who have made tremendous amounts of money, profit in Barbados, and done exceedingly well, and of course, as you know, the majority of them are actually extra-regional institutions, foreign banks as we would call them. It's the only indigenous banking institution would be, the two ones would be Republic Bank and First Citizens. All of the others of the major banks are foreign banks, Canadian-owned banks in particular. And then you have the other financial institutions, the smaller ones, the insurance companies, the credit unions, and so forth and so on, which are predominantly domestic institutions. So the question is whether or not those institutions will stand with the people of Barbados and the government of Barbados and roll over their debt, knowing that their debt commitments, the servicing of them will be met, or whether they will not. My quiet and fervent belief is that they will. The second issue is the one pertaining to the elections. Now, some people expected this year that I would come with an election budget, because the election is within a year's time. At that time, that we would have a lot of giveaways and, the gravy train would be in full flow. And I came with a budget that many people criticize. A budget which sought to cut, or which is seeking to cut the deficit to as close to a balanced budget as possible in terms of the current fiscal program. And we've had marches. We've had all kinds of abusive statements being issued. We've had all types of things being said. But nobody can say that we did not put forward measures to address the situation, because that is exactly what we have done. Now, the success of those measures rely on the people who are implementing them and the people of Barbados who have to endure them. And how we respond to it will be determined by those actions. So far, we've seen some progress. We feel reasonably comfortable. There are one or two areas that are concerned to us, but generally we believe that we're moving in the right direction where that is concerned. Remember, we had a deficit that was as high as just under 12%. We brought it down to 8. We moved it from 8 to 5. We want to go from 5 as close to balance as possible. Not just because we want to have a statistical measure that says that we've balanced the budget, but because we know financing-wise, and since we know the banks are in charge of financing predominantly for government, or a large part of it, there is the possibility that a bank may not come in. So we have to be in a position to have the financing to be able to service our commitments when they come due. And then, so the election is not an issue. It's certainly not for us in the Ministry of Finance. That's for other people to worry about. Our job is to ensure that we put the correct policies in place that will protect the Barbados dollar, ensure that the fiscal deficit comes down, and that government is in a position to finance its social and economic programs. The final issue is the issue of debt restructuring. As we have said, and we said it to S&P very clearly, Barbados is not doing a debt restructuring. And that's not what we're doing. And we don't contemplate doing it, certainly not in the traditional way that people understand it to be. We've said in the budget that since Central Bank and NIS are two major holders of government paper, and they're internal to government because they're government institutions, we will have a conversation with them about the possibility of looking at putting a liabilities management exercise in place that will be voluntary. When we say liabilities management, you have your liabilities, you know when they come due, you know how much money you have to spend, and you look at how such can be managed and handled in a way to ease the pressure off of government's fiscal budget and the country generally. And that exercise will be a voluntary exercise. In other words, we're not commanding anybody to participate. This is not for you to say you have to accept this, and the government is going to, as has happened in other countries, we're going to cut your interest rates and cause you to lose money on the debt that you hold for the government, regardless of whether you want it or not. It has to be a voluntary exercise where all the parties sit down and agree that going forward, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle the market when we come up with future issues in the auction. If the interest rate is 3.5%, can we get that down to 2.5%? Which saves the government a percentage point on the amount that it has to pay to service the debt going forward. So those are the exercises that we're going to. Of course, once you do those things, ratings agencies, by their very nature, get a little anxious. And they say, well, you know, government might possibly do a restructuring exercise and cut the lender's profit margin in terms of the interest rate margin on the coupon. And therefore, we feel that it is our job to adjust the rating downwards so that we alert people in the market that it is likelihood that you may, if you lend to the government of Barbados, that this is what you may face. So that's what they do, you know, and we have to live with them. I didn't take Barbados into a ratings agency. In 1991, 93, there were no ratings agencies around here, so there was nothing to downgrade. So there was nothing for people to get excited every 6 months about. This is not a management tool or exercise ratings management tool for governments in terms of fiscal programming. When we do programs, we look IMF, we look CDB, we look IDB, we look at other agencies and so forth and so on. We don't look at ratings agencies. Ratings do not determine economic policy.